The year is 1944. The world is engulfed in the throes of World War II, but in the small town of Alkaloo, South Carolina, another battle rages. A battle against the deeply entrenched system of racial segregation and prejudice. Alkaloo, South Carolina, is a town cloaked in the harsh realities of segregation. The town is divided along racial lines, with the black community living in a constant state of oppression and fear. The white community, on the other hand, enjoys privileges and opportunities denied to their black neighbors. George Stinney Jr., a black child of just 14, lives a life confined by the invisible walls of Jim Crow. Born into a world that sees him as less than human, George's childhood is marked by the harsh realities of racial discrimination. Despite his young age, he is acutely aware of the limitations placed upon him simply because of the color of his skin. He knows his place, as does everyone else. The unspoken rules of segregation dictate every aspect of life in Alkaloo, from where one can live to where one can work, and even where one can play. George's world is a small one, confined to the black side of town, where opportunities are scarce and hope is a precious commodity. He is small for his age, a mere 5 feet 1 inch and barely 100 pounds. His slight frame belies a spirit that is both resilient and hopeful. Despite the hardships he faces, George dreams of a better future, one where he is judged not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. His days are spent in the shadow of the local lumber mill, where his father toils under the weight of prejudice and limited opportunity. The mill is a symbol of the economic disparity that defines life in Alkaloo, a place where black workers are paid less and given the most menial tasks, while white workers enjoy better pay and positions of authority. George, like many children his age, finds solace in simple pleasures, playing with his siblings, sharing laughter with friends, dreaming of a world beyond the suffocating grip of racial hatred. These moments of joy are fleeting, but they provide a brief respite from the harsh realities of his daily life. He attends the local segregated school, his mind eager to absorb knowledge, his spirit yearning for a brighter future. The school is underfunded and overcrowded, but George is determined to make the most of the limited opportunities available to him. Education is his beacon of hope, a chance to rise above the circumstances of his birth. But fate, it seems, has a cruel twist in store for young George, a twist that will forever stain the soul of Alkaloo. The events that are about to unfold will not only shatter George's life, but will also expose the deep-seated racism that lies at the heart of the community. The railroad tracks cut through Alkaloo like a scar, separating the black community from the white. These tracks are more than just a physical barrier, they are a symbol of the racial divide that permeates every aspect of life in the town. For George and his family, crossing these tracks is a daily reminder of the boundaries that society has placed upon them. It is a physical reminder of the divide that permeates every aspect of their lives. The tracks serve as a constant reminder of the inequality and injustice that define their existence. For the black community of Alkaloo, the tracks are a symbol of the barriers they must overcome in their quest for equality and justice. George and his siblings often play near these tracks, their laughter a fleeting melody against the backdrop of injustice. The tracks are a place of both danger and adventure, a place where the innocence of childhood collides with the harsh realities of a segregated society. Little do they know that these very tracks will become a haunting symbol of a tragedy that will forever shatter their lives and expose the fragility of innocence in the face of blind hatred. The events that are about to unfold will not only change the course of George's life, but will also leave an indelible mark on the history of Alkaloo. The story of George Stinney Jr. is not just about a crime, but about the insidious nature of prejudice that can poison a community, silencing voices and sacrificing truth at the altar of fear and ignorance. It is a story of injustice, of a young boy caught in the crosshairs of a society that values the color of one's skin over the content of one's character. It is a story that demands to be told, a wound on the American conscience that refuses to heal. The tale of George Stinney Jr. serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked prejudice and the importance of fighting for justice and equality for all. The peace of Alkaloo is shattered on March 23, 1944. This small, close-knit community where everyone knows each other is suddenly thrust into a nightmare that no one could have anticipated. The tranquility of daily life is replaced by an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. Two young white girls, Betty June Binnicker, 11, and Mary Emma Thames, 7, vanish without a trace. Their disappearance sends shockwaves through the town, as parents hold their children a little tighter, and neighbors exchange worried glances. The innocence of childhood, once taken for granted, now seems fragile and fleeting. Fear grips the small town, whispers turning into frantic searches. The community bands together, scouring every inch of Alcolu and its surrounding areas. The woods, the fields, and the back alleys are all combed through with a fine-tooth comb, but the girls remain missing. The sense of dread grows with each passing hour. The girls had last been seen riding their bikes near the railroad tracks, their laughter swallowed by the vast emptiness that now held their absence. The tracks, once a place of adventure and play, now seem ominous and foreboding. The community's collective memory of the girls' joyful presence is overshadowed by the haunting silence of their disappearance. The community, desperate for answers, focuses its fear and anger on the most vulnerable target, a black boy. In a town where racial tensions simmer just beneath the surface, the search for a scapegoat becomes a dangerous and all-consuming quest. The need for someone to blame overshadows the pursuit of truth. George Stinney Jr., who had briefly interacted with the girls earlier that day, becomes the prime suspect. At just 14 years old, George is thrust into a world of adult fears and prejudices. His innocence, both as a child and in the context of the crime, is disregarded in the face of the town's collective hysteria. The accusation hangs in the air like a toxic cloud, fueled by racial prejudice and the desperation for a scapegoat. The town's need for closure and retribution blinds them to the glaring inconsistencies and lack of evidence. The wheels of justice, tainted by bias, begin to turn against George. No one stops to question the lack of evidence, the absurdity of pinning such a horrific crime on a child. The courtroom becomes a theater of injustice where the outcome seems predetermined. The voices of reason and fairness are drowned out by the clamor for vengeance. The image of the two girls, their faces frozen in time, becomes a haunting reminder of the tragedy that has befallen Alcolu. Their smiles, once a source of joy, now serve as a painful symbol of loss. The community's grief is palpable, but it is tainted by the injustice that follows. Their families grieve, the community mourns, and amidst the collective pain, the seeds of injustice are sown. The funeral procession, a somber affair, is marked by an undercurrent of anger and confusion. The town's sorrow is compounded by the knowledge that the true perpetrator remains unknown. The search for truth becomes secondary to the need for retribution, for someone to pay for the unspeakable act. The courtroom, the streets, and the homes of Alcolu are filled with a fervor for justice that is blind to reason. The community's desire for closure leads them down a path of irreversible consequences. George, the quiet boy who once found solace in the familiar rhythms of his small-town life, is now trapped in a nightmare. His days are filled with interrogations, accusations, and a growing sense of dread. The world he once knew has turned against him, and he is powerless to stop it. The whispers turn into accusations, the fear into a weapon wielded against him. The town's collective anxiety is projected onto George, transforming him from a boy into a symbol of their deepest fears. The line between guilt and innocence blurs, and the truth becomes a casualty of the town's hysteria. He becomes a symbol of everything that white Alcolu fears, his innocence swallowed by the very prejudice that defines his existence. The town's need for a scapegoat, fueled by deep-seated racial biases, ensures that George's fate is sealed long before any semblance of justice can be served. The disappearance of innocence, both literal and metaphorical, marks a dark chapter in Alcolu's history. The authorities descend upon George's home, their arrival casting a long shadow over the already fear-stricken family. The sound of sirens pierces the air, a harbinger of the turmoil to come. Neighbors peer through their windows, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and dread. The police, with their stern faces and authoritative presence, march into the house, their heavy footsteps echoing through the halls. The family, huddled together, can only watch in horror as their lives are about to be irrevocably changed. George, small and scared, is ripped away from his parents, his pleas for his father falling on deaf ears. His mother's cries for mercy are drowned out by the stern commands of the officers. The boy's tiny hands clutch at the air, desperately reaching for the safety of his parents' embrace. The scene is chaotic, filled with the sounds of anguish and the cold, unyielding responses of the law enforcement officers. George's father, powerless and broken, can only watch as his son is taken away, his heart shattering with each step the officers take. He's interrogated for hours alone without the presence of a lawyer or his parents. The room is stark and cold, the walls closing in on the young boy. The officers bombard him with questions, their voices harsh and unrelenting. George, confused and terrified, struggles to understand what is happening. His young mind is overwhelmed, unable to grasp the gravity of the situation. The loneliness of the room mirrors the isolation he feels, cut off from the comfort and protection of his family. The questions come at him like blows, aimed at coercing a confession from a terrified child. Each question is a weapon designed to break his spirit and force him into submission. The officers' faces are stern, their eyes devoid of compassion. George's responses are hesitant, his voice trembling with fear. The pressure mounts, the weight of the situation bearing down on his small shoulders. The relentless questioning is a form of psychological torture, pushing him to the brink of despair. The Jim Crow South offered no protection for a black child accused of a crime against whites. The laws of the land are stacked against him, a cruel reminder of the systemic racism that pervades every aspect of society. The signs of segregation are everywhere, a constant reminder of his second-class status. The institutions that should protect him are instead instruments of his oppression. The color of his skin is a mark against him, a barrier to justice and fairness. The legal system, steeped in racial bias, is a rigged game where justice is a distant dream. The courtroom is a theater of injustice, where the outcome is predetermined by the color of one's skin. The judge and jury, blinded by prejudice, see George not as a child but as a threat. The evidence is irrelevant, the truth a casualty of their bigotry. The trial is a farce, a mockery of the principles of justice and equality. George, isolated and terrified, provides the confession they seek, a confession likely coerced under duress and fear. His words are not his own, but the product of relentless pressure and intimidation. The confession is a lifeline, a desperate attempt to end the nightmare he is living, but it is a false hope, a trap that seals his fate. The officers, satisfied with their work, see the confession as a victory, a justification for their actions. It is a confession that will seal his fate. The document, signed and sealed, is a death sentence for the young boy. The ink on the paper is a stark contrast to the innocence of the child who signed it. The legal system, with its cold bureaucracy, moves forward with ruthless efficiency. The confession is a tool, a means to an end, used to justify the unjustifiable. George's fate is no longer in his hands, but in the hands of a system designed to crush him. The image of George alone in his cell becomes a chilling testament to the brutality of a system designed to oppress and disenfranchise. The bars of the cell are a physical manifestation of the societal barriers that have trapped him. His small frame huddled in the corner is a heartbreaking sight. The cell is a place of despair, a stark reminder of the consequences of systemic racism. George's isolation is complete, his cries for help unheard and unanswered. He is a pawn in a game he doesn't understand, his life deemed expendable in the pursuit of a swift and convenient resolution. The courtroom, with its formalities and procedures, is a foreign world to him. The adults around him speak in terms he cannot comprehend, their decisions made without regard for his innocence or humanity. George is a victim of a system that values expediency over justice, a system that sees him as a problem to be solved rather than a child to be protected. The authorities, blinded by their prejudice, ignore the lack of physical evidence, the inconsistencies in the coerced confession. Their minds are made up, their biases confirmed by the color of George's skin. The truth is an inconvenience, a barrier to the swift resolution they seek. The evidence that could exonerate him is dismissed, the inconsistencies in his confession overlooked. The trial is a charade, a performance designed to give the appearance of justice while delivering anything but. George's fate is sealed not in a courtroom, but in the hearts and minds of those who see his blackness as a weapon, his age as inconsequential. The jury, a reflection of the society that produced them, sees George not as a child but as a symbol of their fears and prejudices. The verdict is a foregone conclusion, a product of the deep-seated racism that permeates every aspect of their lives. George's innocence is irrelevant, his humanity ignored in the face of their bigotry. He is condemned not by evidence, but by the color of his skin, a stark reminder of the deep-seated racism that permeates the very fabric of American society. The protests and cries for justice that follow are a testament to the enduring struggle against this systemic injustice. George's story is a tragic chapter in a long history of racial oppression, a history that continues to shape the lives of countless individuals. His fate is a call to action, a reminder that the fight for equality and justice is far from over.